Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be talking about analytical methods applied to two original plasters from Convento de Cristo, TOMAR in Portugal, which is an interdisciplinary between art history and science. It's more like science and conservation, and I'll be talking about that. Marta Frade did the presentation before, and she's also a co-author at this presentation, and she focused more on the conservation and the production, and I'm focused giving that to a perspective on education. That's what my presentation is about. So giving a little of context, the school, which is a professional, I beg your pardon? Are you listening? Is it okay? So giving the context of school, it's a professional vocational school. It's a high schoolers, which is secondary school education in Portugal, and it was a work with the final year, the final students of this course, which is 3 years. And it's located here at north of Lisbon. And this is a photo that Marta took at the stucco workshop, which is the context of all this presentation will be the science applied to stucco conservation and restoration, so which is a nice picture. This is the school. It was built just to be a professional school, which is interesting. It's architecture. So connected to the archaeological museum, which is right next to it. So the goals are application of examination and analysis, analytical methods in this workplace training, which is the subject of the students to do the presentation. It's to understand its usefulness, why do we use it, why we want to use it or not, and apply to a context which is plaster or stucco. So we began with the theory, and then we put it into practice. So their final presentations to give the diploma for the students to do their high school in a professional school was presented to a jury, which is a big jury composed with professionals from the GPC, which is a very important conservation institute in Portugal, and some people from the government themselves, and a jury, for example, from the university, from TOMAR, Polytechnical University of TOMAR. The case studies are these two plates, the Putti and Abarradas. These are originals, which is the context of 20 different, or more than 20 years ago. The same school did the conservation of the stuccos at the place, but they kept these originals. They did the conservation and put them copies, but they kept this original, and that is interesting to so many years after they still need conservation, obviously, and it was a very interesting subject, case studies to put in practice some science applied to this field. This is a space management, which is interesting, these two images, the left and the right, and we understood that the one with the circular, it's more, it was more better, because the works would do in a circle instead of a line, which was interesting. Didn't make much sense, but we tried both of them, and the second was more, much better to do this kind of analysis, which are the stations, the different stations are there, explained, but I'll be right away presenting them. Photography registration is the first one. We had the help of, because this is a professional school which has different courses, different degrees. This is the conservation restoration that I'm talking about, but they have photography as well. And we could have the help of the students and the teachers from photography to do this, which is kind of interesting. This is the fullness of interdisciplinarity, and it was very interesting. So they understand the importance of registration, non-calibrated and calibrated images. As you can see, the difference, which was also important. Here, the other plate. And they did them themselves. I taught them how to calibrate them. And then this is quite nice, the digitalization, which is the visible image. Then we had students that had helps with Android mapping, and we did the Photoshop mapping as well, which is more professional, so to say. Not as much as AutoCAD, but still pretty good. And we kind of concluded that the Android mapping with just a cell phone was more, just a minute. Come in, you can listen to it. It's a student of mine. And you don't see that much difference, and it's quite nice that just a little cell phone can do as much as we need for mapping of the conservation that we need to then to map the conservation problems that they have then to solve with Professor Marta Frade. Photogrammetry is very much talked about like nowadays, and I also taught them that they can do the photos and to do a 3D as well as an analytical method. And it was pretty simple. This is open and free software they can use, and they like the results, as you can see, with the mashup and the blender, which is quite nice. And now I have new students that they do exactly the same as Blender, but with a cell phone as well. So I kind of have to update this info for my next class, which is quite interesting that we can learn from our students that are more updated with technology than ourselves as teachers. Then the digitalization and annotations, as you can see, the students did them themselves after they use this kind of mapping with just an Android. This is kind of an example that first they did it at the workshop and handmade, and then they did it on the computer with every problem, conservation and analytical, and the analytical analysis that they did and where. And this is kind of interesting. This is all students' results. This is another play. It's quite nice. They quite understood how to do it, which is very useful for the report that they will be doing as professionals after they finish the degree. Then we also had the thermoegrometry, the studies of the temperature and humidity at the surface, and we did it as well, so they can understand the values. And it was quite nice that they can understand that a simple equipment can help so much to understand the problems or no problems, or the states of conservation that the works need to be. Microphotography then of first shift and second shift, because we have to divide the classes, not only because of the space, but because of COVID as well. This was made during the COVID. You can see some interesting results, all students' results, as well as portable microscopy. You can see we did the visible and ultraviolet light, so they can put on the conservation problems, and they can acquire more detail of those conservation problems, and compared with all the systems, which was nice because the Denolit is quite a semi-professional equipment, and we have Carson, which is quite cheap. We have Denolit with maybe $200, the basic one, and the Carson is like $20 or less, and we can have quite interesting results as well, so they can begin their professional career with quite cheaper equipment than Denolit. Then I have a video, exactly. This is micro-sampling, so we began from the general to the particular as a methodology for the analyticals applied to before they do the conservation and restoration of these works. And this is, when you see the video, I'm going to play it again. These are two people, these are two different hands. It was interesting because, yes, I stopped the video. Okay, okay. So it was only to say that only students that are working for 3 years, for 3 years together, can sample with different hands, because when we sample, we do only ourselves with both two hands, and they did it with different hands. The one used the right hand, and the other person used the left hand. And only students, only people that work very closely can do this kind of sampling. That was only the objective of this video. Data organization, we are talking about high schoolers, so we need to organize very well this data in a complex organization of the analytical methods so they can do the report. Now they are going to do the conservation process and restoration, which is on the article, and then they can add all this information to that report and they do the final presentation. So conclusions. It was very successful even though we had a COVID and all the limitations that we have as a normal school environment. And it was very nice to understand that they were excited to know that those artworks were already restored by their student, Marta Frade. Marta Frade herself was involved in the first restoration of those plaques from Convento de Cristo, and they were very excited to get those hands on the original as well. And I'm sorry, it's another student because I'm already teaching, unfortunately, with all this. It's okay. So in the analytical methods, as a conclusion, is interdisciplinary, and teacher is not only to simplify things, but we can translate, and we do translate between two fields, which is the science and the art conservation. Thank you so much for your attention.